Today, I'm speaking with Matt Cox. Matt was number one on the Secret Service Most Wanted list for $55 million in mortgage fraud. For some context, my favorite category on Netflix is true crime, and whenever I travel, I'm listening to a true crime audiobook. So during the pandemic, instead of watching these documentaries, I thought I would call some of these people directly. Thankfully, Matt answered, and this conversation didn't disappoint. Matt was arrested in 2006 and was facing sentences of up to 400 years. He was ultimately sentenced to 26 years in prison. Once he was released, he started sharing his story across the web. He's also been featured on Dateline NBC, American Greed, Bloomberg, Playboy, the list goes on. On a personal note, this conversation left me conflicted. While it's clear that Matt has done a lot of wrong to a lot of people and is a self-proclaimed pathological liar, the truth is I had a lot of fun talking to him. His charisma is infectious, and you could almost see in my face how I would jump to laughing like he's an old pal to shaking my head, uncomfortable. Regardless of how my emotions played on screen, I just hope this serves as entertainment for some of you. Before we begin, to thank you for checking out the new show, I'm giving away a PlayStation 5 to one of my viewers. All you have to do is like and subscribe to enter. That's it. Details in the comments. Now please welcome Matt Cox to the Welcome Home podcast.
The show was coming on, and I sat there. I said, no. I said, on Sunday, we're watching Walking Dead. And he goes, no, we ain't watching that shit. He said, all them weirdos come in here and watch that stuff, and we ain't watching that no more. I was like, no, we're watching. He goes, why? I said, because we've been watching it for 5 years. He said, I've been here for 5 years. Cook, you just got here. We've been watching it for 5 years. That's why we're watching it. And he was like, and he goes, listen, bro. He said, you ain't watching that shit. You understand? You and all these weirdos come in here, and we ain't watching that shit. Now I had a chair and everything. I got seniority. So he sits there and he goes, nah. And I said, listen, bro. I said, we are watching it, so put it up there. So he didn't put it up. I wrote it in. Then he scratched it out. Then I wrote it in. I mean, this went on all week. And then I started telling everybody, because all these guys are coming to me like, bro, are we going to watch it? All these little geeky guys. Are we going to watch it? Are we going to watch it? I'm like, yeah, we're there. Well, Cook said we're not going to watch it. I said, man, fuck Cook. Cook don't know nothing. So, but I'm terrified. Terrified of Cook. So the day comes, and I remember I put my boots on, because that means like you're ready to go. And Cook put his boots on. Cook's like, listen, bro, I see you with your little boots there. He goes, I'll beat your fucking ass. He goes, don't. He said, I'm telling you right now, we ain't watching. I said, let me explain something, Cook. I said, don't. I said, either you and I, so we're watching it either here or when I yank the TV off the wall, and we can both watch it when we're in the shoe. And he goes, oh, okay. Okay. He said, we'll see. He said, I know you and all these weirdos are supposed to come in here and you're going to turn it. He said, that ain't happening. I said, all right. So, I mean, I'm terrified.
Is he bigger than you?
Oh, are you kidding me? This guy would beat the brakes off me. He would beat me like a small child. But, I can't let him know that. I got to be, So, and everybody knows it's all bullshit. So, but I'm playing it up. So, we both ended up like leaving the room at the same time. And as we were leaving, he made the crack. He said, yo, I know you got all these guys think they're going to come in here and you're going to change the TV. Because that ain't happening. And I turned around, I looked at him, and I went, you know what, Cook? I said, you need to stop worrying about what we're watching tonight, because it was Sunday. Like what we're watching tonight. I said, because I guarantee we're watching Walking Dead. So what you need to worry about is this, is that when it all goes wrong, I said, if we both, end up in the shoe, I said, you need to start worrying about where they're going to send you, because you better hope that they don't send you somewhere out west where they're asking for paperwork that you and I both know you can't provide. Because I know if you're here, you cooperated. He's got people fooled. But I know it. And it was a complete bluff. Like I have no fucking clue. I just feel it. And he looked at me and he goes, somebody say something? And I went, yeah. And he goes, who? And I go, you, just now. I go, you're doing 15 years on what should be a 25 to 30 year, to 25 year minimum. Probably a life sentence minimum. You should be doing at least 25. I said, and you're doing 15. for a half a key of meth. And he looked at me and he goes, look, bro, I don't care if you watch that shit. If you want to watch Walking Dead, watch Walking Dead. That's fine. He goes, I was just playing with you, bro. I was just fucking around. I was just playing. I said, me too, Cook. I was playing too. It's fine. And he goes, all right. He goes, so we're good? We're good? And I went, yeah, we're good. And he goes, okay. And he walks off and leaves. So we ended up watching Walking Dead. Everybody was like, bro, you're awesome. What did you do? Which I said, I just told him this is the way it is. This guy would have killed me. He would have beaten the hell out of me. I mean, I wouldn't have had any, there would have been no, I would have been defenseless. It would be like you beating up a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been flailing my arms, but in the end, it would have just been embarrassing. So anyway, I watched Walking Dead the whole time I was there.
I love it. So I wanted to start at the beginning. Recently, I spoke to Ed Calderon. He was working for Mexican law enforcement. Essentially, he was fighting the war on drugs, fighting El Chapo. And one thing he told me about corruption is he said the moment you walk into their pocket, you don't climb out. The moment you cross that line, you don't just jump right back over that line. That line becomes a wall. And I was like, wow, that's really well put. So I wanted to ask you, what was the first time that you crossed that line?
I mean, I was a mortgage broker. I got my license and I worked for a company called Eagle Lending, and they were a subprime lender. And the very first loan that I ever did, I walked in to I collected all the documents, but I'm new. I don't really, we went to like a 2 or 3 day class, but I've never done a loan. And so I remember going into my manager's office and I put the loan down and I'm all excited. And she starts flipping through all the pages. And I remember she pulled this one document out and put it to the side and flipped through the rest of them. She was okay. She said, you have a 30-day late right here on this document. It was called a verification of rent. And I was like, well, I mean, that's it. The loan's over. This woman's not getting a loan now. And I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, you didn't even check, did you? I said, no, I didn't know. I thought that she said she was good. I don't know anything. Said she'd never been late. And she's like, yeah, well, she lied. She said, so I remember she pulled out the whiteout. It was one of those old whiteouts where it went, you had to, a bottle. She went, she goes, white it out, make a copy, put it back in the file, send it in. She goes, it'll be fine. And I went, I said, that's fraud. And she goes, I go, I could get arrested, right? And she goes, she said, look, worst that happens is if underwriting catches it. She said they don't close a loan and maybe you lose your job. She says, if they believe you had something to do with it. She said, but they're never going to catch it. I do it all the time. It's not a big deal. And I went, I don't know. And she goes, well, it's fine. She said, don't do it. She said, I remember my car was, I was like 2 car payments behind on my truck. Like I'd put everything, I'd risked everything to go work for this company because I knew I wasn't going to get a check for a month or two. And so I was like, she said, look, she said, nobody's looking for my car or my truck. She said, don't do it or don't do it. I don't care. And I was like, oh man. So I went and I whited it out and I put the document in there and sent it off. And like 4 or 5 days later, I got a phone call saying loan's ready to close. And we closed a couple days later and I got a check for like $3,500 or whatever it was, $2,500 or $3,500, and that was it. Next guy that came in, if there was a problem, I fixed it. If there was a problem, I fixed it. If there was a problem, I mean, it got to the point where if you walked in the place, like I said, I said this a bunch. If you walked into my place with a pulse, I was going to get you a loan. I was going to make sure. I'm going to do anything I had to do to make sure that loan happened.
Were you a unique case, or was this just the culture of lending back then?
I mean, a lot of people will tell you, oh yeah, everybody was doing that. I don't think everybody was. I think there was 10 or 20% of the guys were willing to change a document here and there, but overall, I would say that the majority of people either wouldn't do it or maybe even didn't have the ability to do it. Mm. And so I think maybe, like I said, maybe 10 or 20% of guys would do it. And then those guys would only do so much. Like if it's a W-2, like if you have he said he worked here up until this point, and then he got fired and it took him 4 months to find another job. They would say he worked at this company a little bit longer and got this job a little bit earlier, so it matched up. And, when they would write a letter and I quit or I resigned and went to a new job, they'd massage it. But they weren't necessarily willing to say, okay, this guy is actually a carpenter and never claims taxes. And now I'm saying, no, he worked for this construction company and here's his last 2 years W-2s and pay stubs, which I manufactured completely. And if you called, you could call, and I had somebody that would answer the phone and we would call back and verify. And if you checked on his tax ID number, it was correct. If you checked in the yellow pages, which, there was a yellow pages back then, or you checked online, there was a website and there was a phone number, and it was all legit. Like it all looked 100% legit.
When does the FBI, or when do you first have your first run-in with the law, you get on their radar? Was it when you were crossing these lines, the whiteout to the Photoshop? Is that how they first started calling you?
No. It was years later. I mean, I went years and years getting people loans that, should never have probably gotten a loan. And that just went on for years, about 3 years later. Around 3 years later, I had a mortgage broker, a company. There was another company that I would run my own personal loans through because there's something called an arm's length transaction. So if I want to do a loan for myself, I can't do it. So, or if let's say I bought a house and was going to sell it to you, I can't run that loan through my company because I have an interest in it. So it has to be an arm's length transaction. So what I would do is I would go to another mortgage broker and have them do the loan at another company. Well, that person actually got in trouble. And when she got in trouble, she gave the FBI a bunch of my loans and said, look, this guy's a mortgage broker. He's done a bunch of loans for his current wife, where he's buying houses, fixing them up, and selling them to his wife. But she doesn't have my same last name. Like I never let her take my last name. So it looks like an arm's length transaction. And they never say who I am. And the point is I had done like $500,000 in bad loans or something. And then the loans were actually all paid off. Like we'd borrowed the money, renovated the properties, rented them out, and then resold them. No harm, no foul. But the FBI didn't see it that way. And so they came in and she wore a wire on me and got me to talk about all the fraudulent documents that I had manufactured for my wife at the time. And as a result of that, I was actually in the middle of talking to her when I realized she was wired.
Oh, wow.
I was actually I remember going, wow. And I even said, wow, I mean, I hope you're getting something for this. And she started crying and said, Matt, I'm sorry. I don't have to go to prison. And I was like, so I got up and left and I said, tell the agent to call me. Well, the agent called me and I said, okay, I'll come in and talk to you. And I called a lawyer and got a lawyer. And the lawyer I never actually met the guy. The lawyer started negotiating and we negotiated 3 years probation. For me, I said, I'll take the charge if you drop the charge against my wife, which is my ex-wife. And so they never charged her. And I just took the charge, which really, honestly, although she may have known what was going on, she was very, almost not culpable. She just, I said, go in here, sign the papers. She's like, okay. She thinks everything's fine. And so it was really me. So I took the charge. And
at this point, the FBI has called. You have 3 years of probation. Lawyers are involved. You have these two crossroads. One side, you go live in your parents' basement and work at Walmart and start from zero and just try to get it back. The other is you become one of the most prolific, fraudsters in American history. Did you see those two paths clearly, and why did you choose such an extreme one?
I just couldn't stand the idea of actually going and living in my parents' spare room. I couldn't stand the idea of having to kind of take a step backwards. And I had, I'd gotten away with so much for so long. And then when I got in trouble, when I did get in trouble, it was a slap on the hand. I remember thinking, I very clearly got set up. So I just thought I was so smart and so clever that I was just never going to get caught, and this was a one-time thing. And, and I didn't want to take a step backwards. And my personal life had just was so bad that, I was in the middle of a divorce. Like, I'm seeing my son like every other weekend. I mean, it's just like, I don't talk to really my family very much. And, it was basically, I felt like I was on my own. So I didn't have really anything, in my opinion, that much, to lose. So, and it was already just humiliated for my parents. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start flipping houses. But what I'm going to do is basically what I decided is I'm going to start a major scam. Like, I was doing little things, in my opinion. I was doing like light fraud, a little here, a little there. I thought, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take it up a notch, and I'm going to go ahead and go all in. And so I thought, I'm going to start buying and flipping houses. And one of the major issues with flipping houses, or what flipping houses is, you buy them cheap, fix them up, and sell them. The major problem with buying houses is that when you buy them in these areas where you can buy them super cheap, fix them up semi-cheap, and then, okay, so maybe you make 20 grand. Maybe you really do well and make 30. But it's like, it's a whole lot of work, and it's not really easy. You earn that money. Like, you're really making, like, you have to really bust your ass to make 20.
A lot of risk as well.
Right. So what I decided was, and the big problem is, so one, you've got the cost of the rehab, and two, your customers are a problem. And customers are always quitting their job a week before closing, or the day of closing, they can't come up with the down payment, or they bitch about the interest rate, or, it's like, oh, I'm getting a high interest rate. Yeah, well, you also been late on your mortgage, or you're on your rent twice in the last 2 years, or you've also had 3 jobs. You don't even have your down payment. It's like they give you a hard time. It's like, you shouldn't even be getting a loan. So I decided the problem was the cost of the rehab, the cost of actually getting these properties to appraise high. So there's 3 problems. How high can you get them appraised? That's a problem. The rehab, the cost of fixing them up is a problem. And the third problem is the customer. So I figured if I can just fake those 3 things, I can make some money here. So what I did was I decided I was going to buy the properties for 40 grand, and I would record the value of those properties at sales of like 190 and 200 grand. So I'm going to pay the extra doc stamps and record the deed higher. And what that does is it drives the value of an area through the roof. So now when an appraiser comes up and comes out to the house and he looks at the house, he says, wow, this thing is worth $200,000. It's a really horrible area, but there are comparable sales everywhere. Well, because I would go in and I'd buy 10 or 20 houses and drive up the prices. So that's what I did. And then the other problem was I would just clean up the outside of the house. Wouldn't really clean up the inside because I could manufacture my own appraisals by that point. And then the third thing I did was I created my own fake synthetic identities, my own people. And I named these people, like I had a guy named Lee Black, William Blue, David Silver, James Red, Brandon Green. So I had green, black, red, blue. So, and each one of them bought 4 or 5 houses in each one of their names. I convinced Social Security to issue me Social Security numbers that didn't exist to children, to like 10-month-old kids. And then I would create a synthetic identity for a man using that Soc. And then these guys, after a few months, 6 months or so, they'd have 700 and some odd credit scores. Well, you only needed like a 620 credit score at the time to get a loan. And then I'd create their fake employments. And so now you got a credit profile, fake employment, and residency, all of which I could verify. And as far as, do you have the money in the bank? I would create a fake bank website along with bank statements and everything. And so I did that. And I started buying these houses, and I'd get them appraised. I'd renovate it, clean them up a little bit, get an appraisal done. And then the lenders would take my appraisal and they do a desktop review where they send somebody out to the area just to drive by and take a picture. They never go inside. So, and then I refinanced the properties. So a property I bought for 40 grand, I'm now able to get a loan on it for 180 or 140 or 170 or 160. So I'm pulling out over $100,000 on each piece of property. And with that, I did that for about 18 months. I made, the FBI said I made $11.5 million in like 18 months.
So I assume you have to move city to city or area to area. How long does this start catching up where they're knocking?
No, it didn't catch up. A friend of mine got arrested running a scam. And when he got arrested, he just told the police, like, they were like, "Yo, you're going to go to prison." He was like, "Look, I'll give you something. I know about a guy who's running a huge scam right now." He was arrested in Orlando, and he said, "I know about a guy in Tampa that's running a scam." And so he told him about my scam. And so they launched what's called a task force. They put together a task force, and they watched me for 3 or 4 months. And then they handed that task force over to the FBI. And just before the FBI came in to arrest me, I had a friend that was a sheriff's deputy that came and told me, "You're about to be arrested." And so I took off on the run. Like, you have to understand, the properties I was renting that I was doing this with, when they went into foreclosure, the lender doesn't think anything's wrong. They don't know they got scammed. They think the house is worth $200,000. We lent this guy $180,000. He made a few payments. He stopped paying. It went into foreclosure. They then take the house back. This is some lender in California or New York. So they don't know that what happened. They've got an appraisal that says it's worth $200,000. For all they know, this person, this borrower, bought that house for $200,000, made a few payments, lost their job, and stop paying. And when they come back out and try and sell it, it takes them 6 months to a year to sell it, and they sell it and they end up selling it for $40,000 or $50,000. They lose $100,000, and they're just like, "Man, that just happens sometimes. We really made a mistake. The area was going up, and just bad luck." They don't know.
It sounds like there are a lot of moving parts in this. If you were to say, what was the hardest plate to balance? Was it getting the identities? Was it getting the appraisals high, pulling the money? What was the hardest plate to keep afloat during all of this?
I think it was patience. It was having the patience to wait for the area to go up and to create the synthetic identity and wait the 6 months it takes to generate the credit scores. If you have no credit and you get 3 credit cards and you pull now the 3 credit cards are showing up on your credit, and so 2 months later I pull your credit, you have no credit scores. 4 months later, you have no credit scores. 6 months later, you generate the bureaus generate credit scores. So I had to wait 6 months. That was agony. So, I had to wait, and then of course I had to make several payments. And then when the houses went under, it's just a waiting process, and just the stress of knowing all this is happening and that you're juggling all of these things. That's stressful, but it's still not like it's a full-time job. I mean, you can juggle 10 or 20 identities and spend 10 or 20 hours. You could do this. It's like I'm working part-time.
Wow. So when your friend in law enforcement tells you that you're about to get arrested, just emotionally, how do you feel? What's going through your head? How do you make the decision to go on the run? Because that seems like a terrifying decision.
Where are you getting these ideas? Did you read my book?
I've done a great deal of research.
Okay, I'm just wondering because I mean it's funny because you're hitting on these little points that most people don't hit on. Most
Well,
people
thank you.
miss these little things, and you're like that's something to okay. So what went through my mind was that I would never see my son again.
Wow.
That was the first thing that went through my mind was I'll never see him again. Like I figured that if the FBI came and arrested me anyway, that I'd never see my son again anyway because I was going to go to prison, and I knew my ex-wife wasn't going to drag him up to a prison. You know, we had a kind of a, I don't want to say a vicious divorce, but it wasn't like an amicable divorce. You know, she was very angry. I mean, she was basically dating this scumbag who's committing fraud and spending money and cheating on her, and you know, I'm basically just a complete derelict. So it's not like I even have a good argument. I can't even say she was being unreasonable. You know, in a way, she was being unreasonable. She wanted me to stop seeing other women. She wanted me to spend more time with her and my son. She wanted me to stop committing fraud. She wanted me to be a decent person. So, you know, she had to go. So yeah, so it was all bad. So yeah, I thought, oh, that's done. I'm done. I'm over. So, and I just remember thinking I didn't want to go to prison. I thought I would never be able to survive prison. The only movie I'd ever seen about prison was Shawshank Redemption. And there was another movie called The Animal Factory. I'd seen that one too. Both of them were vicious. I mean, guys are getting raped. You know, I didn't know what a federal camp was or a low security prison, or I didn't know any of that. I knew the pen. That's all I knew. And I'm not the kind of guy that's going to survive that. You know, I'm not going to do well. You know, the first day they're gonna shave my head so the mop wig fits right. You know what I'm saying? It's not gonna be good. Everybody thinks they're a gangster, like, oh, I'd go in and I'd fight to the death. Exactly. You'd fight to the death. You'd probably just be beaten unconscious and wake up with, you know, blood running down your leg. You know, it's just not gonna be a good situation. Not sure how Canadian prisons are, but it's not Americans. It's not a friendly bunch. So, yeah, go ahead.
So when you're on the run for several years, on a day-to-day level, are you constantly paranoid? Is there always a rumbling anxiety? What is it like to be on the run for several years, just day to day?
You know, I mean, it's funny. This is going to sound bad. Like, there was some anxiety. Keep in mind, I was taking basically, you know what Paxil is? I was taking like an anti-anxiety drug. I was taking Xanax. I was taking, so I'm not super paranoid. I mean, there were times I like wanted to go home and was curious, and this is going to sound horrible. But these are the kinds of things that I say that make people think well, he's being honest. You know, I know what I'm supposed to say. The appropriate thing is it was horrible and the anxiety and this and this. But the truth is, being on the run was probably one of the most alive times in my entire life. It was one of the most amazing times. There were definitely times when I was, you know, concerned, but overall, it was really a great time. It was just, I was completely on my own. I was left to my own devices, and it was, you know, so it was in a very real way, it was very freeing.
As you were talking, I just think
it's the wrong answer. I can tell you right now. Because the comments, people will be like, this piece of garbage.
Well, I appreciate your honesty, and I think people are going to enjoy it regardless. But as you were talking about your skill to commit these frauds, when you're talking about being on the run, the pressure of that, in my head, immediately I say, why didn't you urgently leave the country? Or is that is that not even realistic? Or did you ever think, I got to get out of the U.S. tomorrow?
Well, I only had when I left, I only had like 80 grand. Oh. Now, that doesn't sound, you know, some people will be like, that's a ton of money. You know, but it's not a ton of money. If you had to start over with nothing, you have no idea, you have no nothing. So it's not like I can trade my car in to get another car. Like, I need a new ID, and you have to start from scratch. You literally have to ditch everything and start from scratch. So I have $80,000. I can't really live on the run for with 80,000 unless I want to live in a single wide mobile home somewhere, work at a carnival. So, I can't go get a regular job because, I'm wanted. So I can't be showing up at the same place over and over again. And there's newspaper articles. There was all these newspaper articles. There were TV programs. So, the first thing I did was I realized I needed more money. My plan was always get $3, $4, $5 million and leave the United States, go somewhere else. But I didn't even know where to go at that time. So the first thing I did was I went to Atlanta because I needed some seed money, and I rented a house and I borrowed like $400,000 on this house. I satisfied the loan on the house, and then I borrowed up like 3 mortgages, and it was like $400,000, and I pulled out like $400,000 out of the house, and then now I've got a little bit of money, but I still need more money. And so I took this girl with me named Rebecca Hauk. And so we became known as the Bonnie and Clyde of mortgage fraud. And so that was my ultimate goal was to leave, but I also, the longer I was on the run, the more comfortable I felt. Like I got caught in the bank. I got caught in a bank one time and handcuffed and brought downtown, and I convinced the detective that they had the wrong guy, and this wasn't what was, I had committed any fraud, and they didn't know I was Matt Cox. At that time I was number 1 on the Secret Service's most wanted list. But they didn't know who they had in custody, although the bank was telling them this guy's committed fraud. He's committed fraud. I borrowed like $1 million on some house, and they caught it, and they were like, this guy's committed fraud. You got to arrest him. So they came in, they put handcuffs on me, and I convinced the detective that I hadn't done anything wrong, that there was a problem at the bank. They brought me downtown. I filled out a police report, and he let me go.
Can you tell me that story? I've heard it, and it blows my mind. It gives me anxiety every time I hear it. So I'd love to hear it from you directly. And I'm sure I'll feel all types of anxious on this side as you're saying it.
I'll tell you the build up to the story is that we were pulling money out of the bank, cash. And there was no Bitcoin. There was no way the only way for you to get the money is I either buy gold and silver or something, or and then you have to trade that back in. That's an issue. Or you basically cash, and nobody's looking for me. So, but every time I would go by this point I'd figured out I'd convince the local driver's license bureaus. I'd figured out how to get them to issue me driver's licenses in other people's names, right? Okay. So I started either running ads and getting people's information, where I'd run an ad for a mortgage company saying, hey, good credit, bad credit, no problem, home loans available, call now. And people would call and they'd apply for a loan, to my cell phone, and I'd take the information. They'd give me all the information, and I'd order all the documents, and then I'd go into a DMV in a state where they didn't live. So I'd run the ad in Florida, but I'm answering the phone in Georgia or South Carolina, and then I'm getting their information. I'm going into the DMV, and I'm getting a driver's license in their name. Or I was surveying homeless people and getting them to give me their information. Once again, I'm tricking them out of it. I'm telling them I work for the Salvation Army, and we're trying to determine where we place our next indigent facility, and they're filling out paperwork, and I'm paying them $20 to participate in a survey. And then I'd get all their information. I'd go into the DMV, and and I see you judging me. So I would get the information. I'd go in the DMV, and I'd have their birth certificate and their social security card. I'd register to vote in their name. I'd get a lease, and I'd go in, and they cut me a check. I mean, they not cut me a check. I'd get a driver's license or an ID. So we would open up bank accounts, and then we'd borrow money, and we'd launder the money through the bank accounts, pull out the cash. Well, my girlfriend used to sit in the car, and I'd walk in, and I'd go cash a check for like $9,000, $8,000. And I'd walk in, she'd go, well, what if you get arrested? And I would say, well, I mean, if I get arrested, then, you go get me a lawyer and get me out, because they'll think I'm Scott Cugno, or they'll think I'm David Freeman, or they will think I'm, oh gosh, what was another one? Michael Eckert or whoever's ID I'm going in the bank. So that's who they're going to think I am. And they're not going to print me. They might print me, but they're not going to run me through APHIS right away because my identity is not in question. So now I think they run you automatically. But back then, and even I've talked to sheriff's deputies who said, no, still, they don't automatically run your identity. Like they'll do them in batches because they get charged for it. So, they'll run your prints. They run them through the local system. Nothing shows up. Then you go in, and I could be out of jail within a few hours. You go get a lawyer, you put up the money for my bail, I get out. We leave. So one time I had convinced someone to owner finance me their house. I satisfied the loan on the house, and then I borrowed like 4 or 5 mortgages on the house. It's like close to $1 million. And I was I was pretending to be a guy named Gary Sullivan. I'd surveyed this homeless guy in Nevada, in Las Vegas. And he was a homeless guy. And when I got on the questionnaire, when I got to the point where I said, hey, have you ever been arrested? He said, yes, for prostitution. And I was like, prostitution? Because when guys get arrested, when you approach a prostitute, if you get arrested, it's for soliciting, not prostitution. The women get arrested. So I was like, prostitution? And he goes, yeah, I'm a male prostitute. He said, that's what I do on, I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't even think about it. I was like, okay. Well, I stole that guy's identity. Went and got a driver's license in another state, South Carolina, bought a house in his name, satisfied the loan on the house, and borrowed 5 mortgages on the house. So I've got like $1 million on this house. Taking out cash. I've opened up 7 or 8 bank accounts. Every other day I'm going and pulling out $8,000, $9,000, $7,000. Got a driver's license in his name. Well, actually I had an ID. So I walked into the bank one day, and this was Wachovia Bank. I think they went out of business. No, I think somebody told me they're still around. I don't know. So I walk in the bank, and I'm pulling out like $7,000 or $8,000. I forget what it was. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And all of a sudden, a couple of sheriff's deputies walk up behind me and grab me by the arm and pull my hand behind my back, and they handcuff me. And I was like, holy shit. Now, keep in mind, I borrowed all these loans on this property. I'd done it so quickly. I closed them all within a couple of days of each other. So nobody knows it's a house that I bought that's worth about $230,000, but I borrowed 5 mortgages. I borrowed almost $1 million on the house, but I did it so quickly that the banks didn't realize it was happening. So the sheriff's deputies pull me into the manager's office. They close the door. And I was like, what's going on? They were like, oh, we just know we got to hold you. Mr. Sullivan, all we know is we have to hold you. And I'm thinking, Mr. Sullivan? Okay. So I'm thinking, they don't know my name. They don't know who I am. So then the detective shows up, and he walks. I don't remember thinking it was going to be the FBI or Secret Service. Detective walks in, and he says, hey, I'm a detective with the Richland County, whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. And he sits down, he says, Wachovia's head of their fraud department is saying that you're committing what's called a shotgunning scam, and that you closed on these loans so quickly they couldn't catch it. And he goes, now you've got 3 mortgages on this house. They didn't know about all 5. They knew about 3. And I went, is that illegal? And he goes, to be honest, Gary, he said, I don't know. And I was like, oh, okay. And I remember thinking, I'm leaving. I'm getting out of this. So he sits down, he gets the head of the fraud department on the phone. That guy calls up, explains, look, this is what he just did. Boom, boom, boom. And he's got it absolutely right. And I'm sitting there going, okay. And he's looking at me, and I go, well, that doesn't make sense at all. I said, yeah, I have 3 mortgages on the house, but I said, I have a first mortgage, a second mortgage, and a home equity line of credit. And he was like, that's not true. That's a lie. They're all first mortgages. And, And so, and why didn't he go to just Wachovia and borrow all the money from Wachovia? And I said, well, I don't really know. I applied for a loan here. The loan officer here told me when I said I needed more money, she said she had a friend that worked at another bank that could get me a second mortgage. And she gave me that number. So I called that person and they got me a second mortgage. And she said she knew someone who could get me a HELOC. I said, so I don't know if this is legal or illegal. I know that this is what they told me was okay. And he's like, he's got a 500%, over what the value of that home is. He's going nuts. And I'm sitting there going, well, what makes more sense? That a guy that works for a labor company, and I pulled out my business card. I said that works for a labor company, got a bunch of banks to lend him $500,000, or that a bunch of loan officers got together and figured out how to do this. I couldn't do this. I don't know how to do this. And the guy starts arguing with the guy. So the detective starts arguing with the head of the fraud department, saying, I don't think this guy could figure this out. I think you got a problem at the bank. And I'm like, yeah. Got a problem with the bank. So we're going back and forth. And I said, and then the guy goes, it's a scam. He's using a fake ID. But I had a real ID that was really issued by South Carolina. He goes, look at his ID. It starts with 000. And the detective said, no, he said, our IDs start with 000. He's Gary Sullivan. I ran him through the NCIC. It's him. And I looked at the detective and I go, oh, come on, man. Now I'm not Gary Sullivan? I go, what's going on, bro? And he goes, I know, Gary. I know. So, we're good. He likes me. He's thinking this guy messed up. He's feeling bad for me. So I'm giving him what I call my golly gee whiz look. Golly gee whiz, I wouldn't know how to do this. So finally he gets off the phone with the guy. He says, look, I don't even know what to charge him with. I got to wait for the district attorney to call me back. And so he hangs up the phone with him. And I get up to leave and he goes, Gary, he said, I'm going to have you follow me back to the police station to fill out a police report. I said, okay. He said, do you have a driver's license? And I went, I said, yeah, I have one, but it's from Nevada. I have no idea if the homeless male prostitute has a real driver's license. So I go, yeah, but it's from Nevada. And the guy, I remember he looked at me and he looked at the other two deputies and they all kind of grinned at each other. He goes, oh, that's right, you're from Nevada originally. And they all grinned at each other. And I remember thinking, he ran me through NCIC, which means he knows I've been arrested for male prostitution. So he thinks I'm a male prostitute. So and they're all grinning at each other. And I remember thinking, oh my God, how embarrassing is this? So one of the sheriff's deputies goes out to his car, checks to see if the guy's really got a driver's license, and he does.
Wow.
I'm 5'6". Okay? So I'm like 5'6". So this guy comes back and hands him the ID and hands me the ID, and he goes, the detective says, so everything check out? And he goes, well, yeah, he's got a driver's license. He goes, it says he's 5'11". And they all look at me and I go, well, fellas, with a good pair of shoes? And they all go, ha, 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 Gary, follow us back to the station. I follow him back to the station. When I drive back to the station, like the detective's in front of me, I'm behind him, and the sheriff's their car's behind me. So, I'm being escorted to the station. My phone has been ringing off the hook. I pick it up. It's Becky, the girl I'm with. And I go, hey, what's up? She goes, oh my God, where have you been? She goes, you're number 1 on the Secret Service's most wanted list. It just came out. There's another article. Oh my gosh. And she's freaking out. I go, listen, I got bigger issues. I was just handcuffed. I'm now headed back to the police station to fill out a police report. And I explain what happened. This is what happened. Somehow they figured this out. And she's like, oh my God, oh my God. She goes, get on the interstate, run. And I go, I can't run. I said, I got a cop behind me and one in front of me. I can't go. I got to go. And she goes, no, don't you dare go. I go, look, the worst thing that will happen is if I'm arrested. You get me a lawyer. And she goes, I'm not getting you a lawyer. And I'm not getting you out on bond. I'm not risking everything I've got to get you out of prison. I'm sorry. Run. And I was like, I said, well, I remember I called her back. I go, you fucking bitch. I said, I guess I better not get arrested. And I just hung up the phone, pulled in the station, got out, went upstairs, filled out the police report. When I was waiting for the police officer, or for the deputy, when I was waiting for the detective, he asked me to stand in the hallway. I stood in the hallway, and there was all the wanted posters. My Secret Service's wanted poster was on the wall. It was the only color wanted poster they had. So,
holy shit.
I was freaking out. So he comes up to me. I mean, it's right, a few feet away. And I'm like, oh my God. I turn around and he's there and he's like, hey, Gary, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. And so they lets me go. He walks me downstairs. And I remember he said, look, we've got a lot of questions. Do me a favor and don't leave the area. And I was like, okay. I said, I own 2 houses here. Where am I going to go? I get in my car and I leave. I actually went to like 3 different banks after that and pulled out more money. Kept pulling out money with Becky the whole time calling me going, get out, what are you doing? So finally I almost got caught in another bank. Like they went to call the police and I realized they were calling the police. So I jumped in my car and left and that was it. I think we left $700,000 in the bank, something like that. We had like $600,000 in cash. So we left a bunch of money in the bank.
Wow. So you get out this time, not without stress, not without anxiety, but you figure it out. Then let's flash forward to when you actually do get caught. What is that day or week leading up? Do you have any thoughts as this is happening that something's going on, that you're being watched? Walk me through that day and week where the road ends, you get caught.
The only issue that was happening that was leading up to that was that there had been an article in Fortune magazine, because by this point I had the girl Becky and I had broken up, and so I left and I went to Nashville, Tennessee, and she got caught like a year later. And there was a huge article in Fortune magazine on her. And, she and I, and basically this guy's still on the run, that sort of thing. So that article had come out. And then so the girl I was with at the time was actively checking every day, like if there were any other articles. And there were constantly articles. There was something like, this one newspaper did like 30-something articles on me. Just one newspaper. And there was a dozen newspapers, and there were articles. I was in like Bloomberg's Business Week, and so, but there was a blog that talked about how Dateline was in the middle of doing a story on me, and it was going to air in a few months. So,
wow.
I was, at that point, I was like, well, this is Dateline. At that time, Dateline was huge, which meant it was going to be, this was prior to people watching just YouTube and watching like all the streaming networks that people basically binge on, and they don't really watch local, like the networks anymore. So everybody's going to watch this. Everybody watches Dateline.
I assume the person working at Starbucks, your neighbors, they seen Dateline, they see you, they call. It was that mainstream, I'm sure, at the time.
My fear is that at this point, 30, 40 people know me that see me constantly. One of those people is going to look at me and go, they're going to look at me on TV and go, that guy comes into Starbucks every day. Or, hey, I know that guy. That's Carter. I just put a roof on for Carter, or that's so-and-so's boyfriend. So I knew it was an issue. So I decided I was going to start pulling out money. So I went and satisfied the loans on every piece of property I had. And I started borrowing money. So I start borrowing money. I don't know what I borrowed at that point. We had a few $100,000, but we owned a bunch of property too. So that was like $1 million worth of property we owned. And I think I probably was in the middle of borrowing. I'd borrowed maybe $500,000. So I'm in the middle of trying to borrow maybe $2-3 million over the next month and then just pulling it out. So we started giving checks to everybody, like all my construction workers, friends, and my girlfriend and I were sleeping with this other girl. So my girlfriend gives her some checks and asks her if she'll go cash these checks and give us the cash. And I believe that sparked a conversation between them on what's happening. Because my plan was pull out a bunch of money and I was going to go to Australia. Now I'm going to pull out the money. I've opened up a corporation. I'm going to put a bunch of money into the corporate accounts. And then I can then wire the money or just walk out of the country with a cashier's check. So I planned on going to Australia, and Australia at the time had a policy that if you showed up with a couple $100,000 and a business plan, you could become a permanent resident alien. You were allowed to buy property. You could open a business. You got a driver's license issued to you. Like basically you're there. I can't vote and I can't get a job here, but I could retire here. I can buy 20 houses, rent them out, and I'm going to show up with a few million. So that's my game plan. And basically, while in the middle of this, my girlfriend confided in this other girl who I was, and she contacted the Secret Service. And the Secret Service watched the house for a few days, and then they arrested me. The short version is they watched it for a few days, and they arrested me. That's the short version.
At what point, I've heard you say the moment you said, yeah, I'm Matt Cox, you gave it up. You didn't give him a fake name. You didn't give him the fake ID. How did it feel with all these fake identities, trying to keep track of it, how does it feel to say your legal government name? And why? Why did you just give up when you did?
You know what's so funny? Remember Becky, the girl that I left with? Mm-hmm. It took an hour. It was an hour before when they caught her, she didn't admit it for an hour. She was telling the Secret Service, you're going to get arrested. Or no, I'm sorry, you're going to get sued. You're losing your job. She held out and wouldn't admit who she was till they put her hand on the scanner. And then she went, all right, I'm Rebecca Hout. As soon as they walked up to me and said my name to me, I admit, I just was like, yeah. I mean, they're holding up pictures they're looking at me. They're going, is this him? Keep in mind, during this whole time, I've had 2 hair transplants. I've had a nose job. I had what's called a mini facelift where they remove, like they tighten your face up. I've had all kinds of plastic surgery. I've had liposuction done. I've lost weight. I look drastically different. So they're showing pictures of me. They're looking at each other. One guy's going like, I don't think that's him. Another guy, they're like, no, it's him. Look at his eyes. That's him. It's him. And the guy looked at me, Agent Bronskowski or something, I think. Forget what his name was. Bronskowski. Anyway, everybody looked at me and said, hi, Mr. Cox. How are you? He said, we've been looking for you. You are Matthew Cox, right? And I was just like, yeah, I'm Matt Cox. I'm Matt Cox. I'm Matthew Cox. Yeah. What was it like? It was. That was actually a huge relief for some reason. It really was just like, but it was also kind of a combination of relief, like it was over, and also kind of doom. Like I knew I was this is going to sound really messed up. Do you want to know what one of the first things that went through my mind was when they pulled the guns out and actually like put the cuffs on me and like, when they're literally like pointing the guns at me and everything? The whole week leading up to that, the new James Bond was coming out. Okay, with Casino Royale, the first one with Daniel Craig. So the whole week, my girlfriend was saying to me, hey, on Saturday, we're going to go do this thing with Trina. We have that festival and we're going to take, and I was like, yeah, I understand. But on Friday, I said, we're going to see James Bond. And she goes, yeah, I know. Okay, well, we're going to see James Bond, but I'm saying on Friday. I said, okay. Then she goes, hey, listen, I was wondering, there's a sushi place. Can we get, on Friday night, you want to go? Yeah, no, I understand, but first we're going to see James Bond. And she goes, I know, we're seeing James Bond, okay? Like I did this a whole week. I was like, I don't care what we do. Friday we're seeing James Bond. I love James Bond. And so when these guys are like, freeze, get on the ground, and I'm like, my thought was, fuck, I'm not gonna be able to see Casino Royale. No, I'm not gonna be able to make that. I know I can't see that movie. I didn't see that movie for like 4 to 5 years later. I saw it on the Institution movie channel when they played it.
So now that you're caught, we mentioned it earlier about the fears of not seeing your kid or your parents. What is the conversation like telling your mom or your parents or your child that it's over, you're going to jail for a while?
Well, I mean, like I've talked to my son on the phone once or twice, but very briefly. He's furious with me, angry at me. You know, he's dug in, doesn't want to talk to me. You know, so that's a bad situation there. But you know, and my parents already know I'm done. You know, my brother-in-law's a lawyer, so he's already told them, well, he's done. It's over. Nobody expected me to get the amount of time I got. You know, that wasn't something that I think anybody expected. But so I mean, you know, what's the conversation? They've been watching TV. I mean, I was on Dateline, I was on American Grammar. I mean, there's all these things that are happening. They know he's done. My uncle is a lawyer who's done federal criminal law. He's telling him he's done. There's nothing this guy can do. So, you know, my public defender shows up. She's telling me I'm going to get 10 or 12 years. Yeah, that would have been nice. I'd have been happy with 10 or 12 years. But I got 26 years and I did 12 years.
Why do you think you got such a long prison time? Was it because of the names that you would use, or were there people involved that lost their money? Why, or were you just an example?
No. I mean, you know, I have as far as actual victims are concerned, I have 4 individual victims that lost. You know, one guy lost like $6,000, one lost like $4,000, one lost like $10,000. You know, so, and I didn't take the money directly. This is money that they went and got a lawyer. So I screwed up the title to their house, and they hired a lawyer to fix it. So, you know, those are victims of mine because obviously they didn't deserve that, and they shouldn't have had to have paid some lawyer, and you know that. So, but the bulk of my victims, over 50, are banks. I have over 50 victim banks. It was basically late 2007, and the financial crisis was just starting. And what I had done was so sensational, and because the whole way, you know, keep in mind, I called the FBI agent several times who was looking for me. You know, and where I was genuinely talking about, hey, you know, possibly turning myself in, thinking about turning myself in, that in front of the judge, that turned into I was taunting the FBI. You know, but I wasn't taunting the FBI. I was genuinely calling to say, hey, what kind of time, if I turn myself in, what kind of time would I get? And there were several near misses. I was almost caught in a Starbucks by the U.S. Marshals. The U.S. Marshals also missed me in Louisiana. I had 24 passports. I had over 24 driver's licenses. I had, you know, it was $15 million in loss that they were saying. And honestly, it was the media coverage. I mean, they really want to pick somebody to say, hey, look, this is what happens if you commit fraud. And there was fraud that was coming out at the time. It was just before it was at the beginning of the 2008, you know, financial crisis. So this is November of 2007. Things are bad. So they have, guess what? We've got the poster boy for mortgage fraud, and he's been flaunting. He's cocky and he's arrogant. Let's slam this guy.
I've heard you be very open and very honest and hard on yourself. You've called yourself a narcissist. You've called yourself a sociopath. I wonder, with so much time to reflect, do you believe that this path was inevitable, like genetically you were born with this, or were you just in a market with a lot of opportunity and human nature will always draw you to greed, why do you ever ask yourself why you ended up taking such like an extreme path?
I mean, I think the opportunity was there. I think I didn't want to be a failure. And I think and I was an opportunist. I mean, it was available. It was there. It came very easy to me. My particular skill set, like I've talked to mortgage brokers that are like, who have made these comments like, well, I could have done that, but I chose not to do it. Well, the truth is, could you? Could you have done it? I could have changed a W-2. Well, I understand. If you're saying you could have changed a W-2, okay. But you're acting like you could have done the things that I did to the extent that I did them. And that's not necessarily true. You have to have a certain skill set. And you have to, when obstacles get in your way, you have to work your way around those obstacles. And most people just stop. And the truth is that, plus it's way easier to commit fraud than it is to actually make $1 million legitimately. And this was a very easy path, which fed into my, narcissism that, look at me, I'm amazing. Look how smart I am. Look how, and it's just a insecurity. And I think that's what it boiled down to. And I thought that I really genuinely thought making that money was going to make me happy. I really thought that having that money and be able to buy whatever I wanted, having people look at me and think how great I am and, catering to my every need. And I thought that was going to make me happy. That's what I want, right? That's what everybody wants. But the truth is, I had tons of money and I was never really happy and I never really felt like it was enough. And I don't know that it was greed because I don't really have any money now. And I'm extremely happy. I'm probably happier now than I was happier in prison than I probably really ever was, because there's no stress and there's no expectations. And I was able to do what I like to do, which is write stories about these guys. And that sounds bizarre. I can see it in your face that you think it's bizarre. And it is bizarre. It's odd.
I've never heard someone say that their happiest moments were in prison. So it is definitely shocking.
Great moments in prison. I probably laughed harder in prison than I ever have in my life. I mean, there have been times that I just was in tears crying. I was laughing so hard. And I've met some of the best people I've ever met were in prison. And some of them still are in prison. And, some of the most generous people I've met, which is, and listen, and some of the most scumbag people I've ever met were in prison too. Also, unfortunately, I've met a lot of them out here too. At least there, you're like, hey, if I feel like you're kind of a scumbag and you're here, you're definitely a scumbag. But I definitely, I think I definitely should have gone to prison. Absolutely should have gone to prison, and definitely met some amazing people. And I think that prison for me did exactly what it was supposed to do.
Wow. Do you ever have tough months or periods in your life financially where all of a sudden a creeping thought late at night is, hey, I could always go back to that?
Oh, I do that all the time. That's every day. That never goes away. That's every day. And I said last night I was eating dinner with my mom, and my mom has a home healthcare worker that, she's always got a home healthcare worker with her. So the home healthcare, we were all having dinner, and she and I were cleaning up, and I was throwing stuff away, and my mom was like, well, are you doing okay financially? Do you have enough money? I was like, oh, I have enough money. And I'm selling paintings, and my book, I have several books that are out, and I have a memoir that's out. And I said, she's like, oh, how much do those sell for? And are you doing okay? And she's asking, that's fine, Mom. She's 91. So as we're talking, she goes, well, what if you stop being okay? And I said, I'm not going to stop being okay, Mom. But I remember I looked at the home healthcare worker and I go, there's always fraud, like that. And she goes, oh, Ay Dios míos, Mateo. She's, um, but yeah, I mean, and so I think about it all the time. I constantly, and in a way, it's kind of a crutch because I kind of think to myself, I'm willing to take chances and put all the emphasis I am right now on writing, on I have a YouTube channel, on my paintings, on I can do all this with confidence because I do constantly think if it all goes wrong, there's always fraud. I can always go back and to commit fraud. But, obviously things are going great.
On another hypothetical question, let's picture it's 2021 and you never get caught. The Secret Service has given up. They're like, you know what? The tech has changed, or there's a different worker. It's 2021. You don't get caught. Where are you, and what do you think you're doing if prison never happened?
I mean, I think I would have probably just gone to Australia. I would have showed up in Australia with probably $3 million. I would have bought a bunch of rental properties. And keep in mind, I was going to Australia as someone else. Like, I'm not going as me. I've got a passport in someone else's name. I'm going to go there as not even the guy that I was in Nashville, which was Joseph Carter. I had a completely false identity in another person's name. So I'm going to get a passport in that person's name. I'm going to show up in Australia as that person with a few $1 million. I'm going to transfer the money to Australia, open up an Australian corporation, hire some Aussies, buy a bunch of rental properties, and basically just collect my rent and do all the maintenance or whatever I have to do and just become a management company and start buying property. I'll build up the guy's credit. Look, it's not hard to manipulate the system if you have two things. If you have time and you have money. With time, money, and a little bit of knowledge, it's not hard. If you're patient, you can really manipulate the financial system. Now, I can't imagine the financial...
Even in a modern time, I guess I figured when I would read about your story that you had success in a lower tech era. Or do you think today, right now, this month, with all the advances in security, fraud is still easy to execute?
First of all, keep in mind, I'm stealing. The people's identities that I was stealing aren't someone like you. If I stole your identity, you'd probably figure it out within a couple of days or a week or a month. I'm stealing people that have no ability to find out their identity's been stolen. Or I'm creating synthetic identities because I'm convincing the Social Security Administration to issue me Social Security numbers. I'm getting driver's license. I'm creating false identities, getting passports. So these are not people that are looking for their identities. These are synthetic identities, some of them. So that still happens to this very day. It's very easy to manipulate the bureaus. The other thing is, look, let me give you an example. I got out of prison with no credit. Zero. My credit scores were zero. I went to the halfway house for 7 months. When I walked out of the halfway house, all right, I had 750 credit scores. All I did, I got 3 secured credit cards. I put up $200, $400, $300, and I kept the balances below 30%, and I made the payments. That's not difficult. That's happening right now. I could go right now and get 4 homeless people's identities who have no credit. And look, even when I pulled their identities and they had bad credit, I'll pay off your credit. I'll pay off your medical bills or whatever. Even when I grabbed some of these guys and I wanted to get a driver's license in their name, and they had a suspended license because they had a $500 ticket that wasn't paid, I pay the ticket. It's not like this guy's going to wander into the DMV and try and get his driver's license. He knows it's suspended. It's been suspended for 3 or 4 years. So what do? I get it, and I get the driver's license, and now I've got an ID. And the point is that none of this has changed. Nothing's changed. It would not be difficult at all to reestablish some kind of a system of fake identities and borrow money. None of that's difficult. And people are very trusting.
Well, Matt, there's 2 parts to what fascinates me about you. There's your story, the things that you've done, and you are one of the most talented storytellers. I feel like someone could have done what you've done, but if you don't execute these stories with the charisma, not that many people care. I wanted to wrap up on a final personal question that I was curious with, because you've become kind of an internet celebrity. You have had documentaries about you, and you have this history where you're brutally honest with yourself. What is dating like with all it takes is one YouTube search or Google search for your potential date or potential girlfriend to see some of the most terrible things that you've ever done? So what was dating like with the status that you've built?
Initially, I got out and I got on to Bumble. What is the other one? Tinder? Bumble, Tinder, and Match.com, right? So I got kicked off of Bumble, kicked off of Tinder, and Tinder is like just a hookup site, and got kicked off of Match. All of them because I was letting girls know immediately, hey, this is who I am. Here's who I am. Then eventually I started saying, not going to tell them that, because the psychiatrist that the federal system, for the first year, I had to go to a psychiatrist once a week. She actually told me, stop telling people, stop being so honest with these women. Let them get to know you, go on 2 or 3 dates. And I was like, listen, I said, I'm sleeping with the chick if not the first date, by the second date. I said, so you're saying sleep with him? She's like, look, I'm just saying you can answer questions without being super honest. I mean, she's telling me to mislead people. So I stopped giving them my full name. Well, eventually I went to go meet this one chick and I gave her my phone number. She backdid my phone number and immediately saw what was out there. And then she contacted Tinder, shut me down. She was on all the sites too, shut down every single site. Within a week, I was done. I ended up dating a girl that I was actually in the halfway house with, which had just gotten out of federal prison for a meth conspiracy. And I started dating her, and her name's Jess, and she's awesome. And we are, I think her sister put it, she said, we're equally yoked. We both have the same issue. We both have the same baggage. So we're actually really good together. I'm really glad that I got kicked off those sites. I'm glad that I ended up with her. She understands me. Listen, I had one girl that I was talking to on one of the dating sites, and she said, we had talked a few times and we were going to meet, and I told her exactly what was going on, and we've been talking, and she said, I said to her, okay, we were going to meet, and I said, she asked me some question. I said, oh yeah, when I was in prison, that must have happened when I was in prison or whatever. And she goes, can we please not mention that you were in prison? And she kind of like laughed, and I went, no, we can't not mention that. And she went, what do you mean? I said, let me be real clear about this. There are 2 kinds of people. Those people that understand the things that I did and are okay with those things, and the person that I am right now as a result of those things. And they're okay with it, and they're completely 100% accepting of it. So there are those people that are in my life, and there are those people that can go fuck themselves. I said, you need to determine which one you are. I said, it doesn't sound like we're going to be going to dinner. And she goes, no, we're not going to be going to dinner. I said, okay, well, I appreciate it. It's nice talking to you. I said, I hope you find somebody. She goes, all right, bye. We hung up. I'm not going to run around the rest of my life denying the things that I've done and crying about it and bitching and moaning and apologizing constantly for the things that I've done and the person that I was. And look, we all do bad things. We've all done bad things. Now, granted, my bar is way up here, but still, people do bad things, and people need to be forgiven for those things. And if they're not, and you're not someone who's going to be forgiving of those things, well, then you don't have to be in my life, and that's fine.
To celebrate the new podcast, I'm giving away a PlayStation 5 to one of my viewers. All you have to do is like and subscribe. That's it. Full details in the comments. Good luck.